The twin suns of Zephoria burned crimson against the darkening sky, casting long shadows across the battlefield. Princess Elena stood tall among the ruins, her silver armor stained with the blood of her enemies. Bodies of fallen soldiers littered the ground around her. She gripped her energy blade with white knuckles, its azure glow illuminating her face as she stared down the approaching wave of enemies. "For Zephoria!" she cried, her voice carrying across the field as the remaining royal guards rallied behind her. They were outnumbered 5-1. The enemy commander, General Draven, watched from his hovering platform, his weathered face twisted in a triumphant smile. Victory was within his grasp. Then a lone figure appeared on the ridge above the battlefield. A human man, older but standing straight and powerful, his eyes reflecting the determination of someone who had faced death countless times. Elena felt something stir within her, recognition impossible as it seemed. The man raised his hand, activating something on his wrist. A pulse of energy swept across the battlefield, disabling the enemy's advanced weapons. In the confusion that followed, he moved with lethal precision, each strike economical, born from decades of experience rather than youthful strength. The tide turned. General Draven's smile faded. Their eyes met across the battlefield. Elena and the human warrior. In that moment, something ancient awakened between them. The image faded to black. Jack Reynolds stared at the small security monitor, the dim light illuminating the deep lines in his face. At 58, his once dark hair had faded to steel gray, matching the color of his eyes. The night shift at the Horizon Space Research Facility in Arizona was always quiet. Too quiet for a man who had spent 20 years in naval special warfare. He adjusted his security uniform too tight across the shoulders despite his age. Jack had maintained the discipline of daily training, his body still hard with muscle, though slower to recover than in his SEAL days. The facility staff called him the old man behind his back, the retired warrior relegated to checking badges and watching monitors. "Another exciting night in paradise," he muttered, scanning the empty hallways of the facility. Scientists had gone home hours ago, leaving only the essential overnight staff and the experimental quantum gateway prototype silently humming in the main chamber. Jack's security clearance wasn't high enough to know exactly what the device was supposed to do, only that it cost billions and was considered a breakthrough in dimensional physics. The radio at his hip crackled. "Reynolds, you still awake up there?" The voice belonged to Mitch, the 20-something security supervisor who had never served a day in his life, yet somehow outranked Jack. "Affirmative," Jack replied, military habits never quite fading. "Just checking. Try not to fall asleep this time." Mitch chuckled at his own joke. Jack didn't bother responding. He'd learned to swallow his pride years ago after the mission that ended his career. 10 years had passed since the operation in Syria went catastrophically wrong. 8 good men lost, and Jack, the team leader, had shouldered the blame. The official report cited his failure to adapt to changing tactical conditions. A bureaucrat's way of saying he was too old for field operations. No formal charges, just a quiet recommendation for retirement and the slow dissolution of the life he had built. The security console beeped, pulling Jack from his thoughts. A motion sensor had activated in the east corridor near the maintenance access. Probably just another false alarm. The system had been glitchy all week. Still, Jack had survived 3 combat tours by never ignoring the small details. He radioed in. "Mitch, I've got movement in the east corridor. Going to check it out." "Probably another rat," Mitch replied dismissively. "But sure, old-timer, knock yourself out." Jack grabbed his flashlight and made his way down the corridor, footsteps silent from decades of training. The facility was eerily quiet, just the hum of air conditioning and distant machinery. As he approached the east corridor, he noticed something unusual, a faint blue glow emanating from beneath the maintenance door. His instincts sharpened. The maintenance room housed some of the power relays for the quantum gateway. It should be locked and dark at this hour. Jack drew his service pistol, a poor substitute for the weapons he had once carried into combat, but better than nothing. "Security console, this is Reynolds," he whispered into his radio. "Possible breach at East Maintenance Access. Request backup." Static was his only answer. Jack tried again. Nothing. Either the radio was malfunctioning or something was interfering with the signal. Neither option was good. He had a choice: retreat and sound the alarm manually or investigate further. 20 years of special operations training made the decision for him. He approached the door silently, years of tactical movement ingrained in his muscles. Pressing his ear against the metal surface, Jack heard soft movements inside, not the scurrying of a rat, but deliberate, careful motion. Someone was definitely in there. Jack tried his security card on the reader. Red light, access denied. Another bad sign. He should have been able to access all non-classified areas. Whoever was inside had overridden the security protocols. Old tactical assessments ran through his mind. One unknown hostile, possibly armed in a contained space. Limited exit options. No immediate backup. Jack had faced worse odds in Fallujah with nothing but a combat knife. He positioned himself beside the door, weapon ready, and used his security override code on the keypad, a last resort measure that would trigger a silent alarm at the main security desk. The lock disengaged with a soft click. In one fluid motion, Jack pushed the door open, stepped into the frame with his weapon raised, and announced, "Security, don't move." What he saw froze him in place. It wasn't a human intruder. The figure crouched by the power relay panel was humanoid, but definitely not human. Its skin had a slight bluish tinge that seemed to shift and change almost like a chameleon. The eyes that turned toward Jack and were completely black, reflecting the room's light like polished obsidian. For a split second, neither moved. Then the creature's hand, with too many joints in the fingers, pressed something on a device attached to its wrist. The air around it shimmered, and suddenly a perfectly ordinary-looking maintenance technician stood before Jack. "What the hell?" Jack managed his weapon, still trained on the figure. The disguise flickered momentarily, revealing the alien form beneath before stabilizing again. "Human," it said in a voice that sounded like several people speaking simultaneously, "you should not be here." Jack's mind raced. He had encountered many things in his career: terrorists, warlords, pirates, but never anything like this. Yet the tactical situation remained the same: unknown, hostile, contained space, no backup. "Step away from the panel," Jack commanded, his voice steady despite the impossible situation. "Hands where I can see them." The creature tilted its head in an unnervingly inhuman way. "You do not understand what is happening. I must complete my task." "Your task," Jack said evenly, "is over. Whatever you're doing stops now." The creature's disguise flickered again. "The gateway must be activated. It is the only way to warn them." "Warn who?" Instead of answering, the creature moved with startling speed, lunging not at Jack, but at the power relay panel. Jack fired the shot, echoing in the small room. The bullet struck the creature's shoulder, causing its camouflage to fail completely. But it didn't stop. Its hand slammed down on the panel, initiating some kind of sequence. Red warning lights began to flash. "Facility alert," an automated voice announced over the intercom. "Quantum gateway activation detected. Unauthorized power surge in main chamber. All personnel evacuate immediately." The creature turned to Jack, its alien features now fully visible. "It begins. The prophecy unfolds." Jack had no idea what that meant, but he knew danger when he saw it. He lunged forward, tackling the alien away from the controls. They crashed to the floor together, the creature's strength surprising for its slender frame. Jack's military combatives training took over as he grappled with the being, trying to subdue it without killing it. "What did you do?" Jack demanded, pinning the creature with a joint lock he'd learned decades ago. "What's happening?" The creature stopped struggling, those black eyes staring directly into Jack's. "You are the one, the warrior from Earth. The prophecy speaks of your return." "I don't know what the hell you're talking about," Jack growled, tightening his hold, "but you're going to help me shut this down." A deep rumble shook the facility, the floor vibrating beneath them. The lights flickered, then died, plunging the room into darkness save for the red emergency lights and the eerie blue glow now emanating from the main chamber. The creature used the momentary distraction to break free from Jack's hold, shoving him back with inhuman strength. "There is no stopping it now. The gateway opens. We will both witness what lies beyond." Jack scrambled to his feet, weapon raised again, but the creature was already moving toward the door. "Stop!" he shouted, giving chase as the alien fled down the corridor toward the main chamber where the quantum gateway was housed. The facility trembled continuously now, equipment crashing to the floor, ceiling panels coming loose. Jack sprinted down the hallway, his aging body protesting the sudden exertion. Ahead, he could see the alien entering the main chamber, where an impossible light pulsed and swirled. Jack burst into the room just as the quantum gateway, a massive ring of technology that dominated the center of the chamber, came fully to life. Inside the ring, reality itself seemed to tear open, revealing a swirling vortex of energy and light. The alien stood at the edge of the platform facing the gateway. It turned to look at Jack one last time. Your destiny awaits, warrior of Earth. The circle complete. Before Jack could respond, the creature leapt into the vortex and vanished. The gateway's energy surged, the vortex expanding beyond the confines of the ring. Alarms blared as the system went critical. Gateway containment failure, the automated system announced. Catastrophic collapse imminent. Evacuate immediately. Jack backed toward the door, but the expanding energy field moved faster. Equipment around the room began to lift off the ground, pulled toward the gateway. Jack grabbed a support pillar, holding on as the pull intensified. His mind flashed to his SEAL training. How to survive extreme situations, how to keep calm when everything went to hell. But nothing had prepared him for this. The pillar he clung to groaned, metal bending under the strain. With a crack, it tore free from its mounting. Jack felt himself lifted, helpless against the gateway's pull. As he was drawn inexorably toward the swirling vortex, time seemed to slow. Jack thought of his empty apartment, his solitary life. No wife, no children, no real friends left. Just the memories of a career cut short and the burden of failure he'd carried for a decade. Well, he muttered, as the gateway's energy engulfed him, at least this beats night shift. The world dissolved into blinding light and sensation beyond description. Jack felt himself torn apart and reconstructed, falling through endless space and no space at all. Images flashed through his mind, alien landscapes, strange beings, battles, and peace, life, and death cycling over and over. And through it all, a face appeared repeatedly, a woman with silver hair and eyes that held both strength and wisdom. Someone he had never met, yet somehow knew better than he knew himself. Then darkness claimed him. Pain was Jack's first sensation. Real, tangible pain. The kind that told you that you were still alive. He lay perfectly still, years of survival training taking over. Assess before acting. Determine threats before revealing consciousness. The air felt different, thinner with unfamiliar scents. The ground beneath him was hard and uneven, not the smooth floor of the research facility, and the light pressing against his closed eyelids had a quality he'd never experienced. Brighter somehow, with a spectrum that felt wrong. Jack carefully controlled his breathing, listening for any sound that might indicate danger. Wind whistled across stone. Something like birds called in the distance, but their cries were unlike any Earth species he knew. No human voices or movements. Slowly he opened his eyes. Two suns hung in a violet sky, one large and golden, the other smaller and crimson, both illuminating a landscape of jagged mountains and strange vegetation. Jack lay on a rocky outcropping, overlooking a vast valley where crystalline formations jutted from the ground like massive gemstones. In the far distance, something that might have been a city gleamed silver against the mountainside. "Well, I'm definitely not in Arizona anymore," Jack murmured, carefully sitting up. His security uniform was torn and singed, but his body seemed remarkably intact given what he'd just experienced. His service pistol was still holstered at his side, and his tactical knife remained in its ankle sheath. He took inventory of his situation. No food, no water, no communication devices. Just the clothes on his back and his weapons. It wasn't the worst situation he'd been in. That honor belonged to 3 days trapped behind enemy lines in Iraq with a bullet in his shoulder, but it was certainly the strangest. The quantum gateway had obviously worked, sending him somewhere. Another planet, another dimension. It didn't really matter at the moment. Survival came first, questions later. That had always been the SEAL way. Jack stood carefully, testing his balance in the slightly lower gravity. His body felt lighter, movements coming easier despite his age. He scanned his surroundings methodically, identifying potential threats, resources, and vantage points. The rocky terrain offered good defensive positions. The crystal formations might provide water. The distant city meant civilization, though whether friendly or hostile remained to be seen. First priority, water. Jack made his way down from the outcropping, moving with the careful precision of a veteran operator. The strange vegetation might hold moisture, but he'd need to test it for toxicity first. Better to look for standing water, if possible. As he descended, Jack noticed something odd about the crystal formations. They seemed to pulse with faint internal light, responding to his proximity. When he approached the nearest one, a shoulder-height spire of what looked like blue quartz, it brightened noticeably. Jack hesitated, then carefully touched the crystal with his fingertip. A surge of energy ran up his arm, not painful but intense. Instinctively, he jerked back. The crystal dimmed again, returning to its previous state. Interesting, he muttered, examining his finger. No damage, no residual sensation. Some kind of energy conductor, perhaps. He continued his descent into the valley, alert for any sign of animal life or other dangers. The terrain was challenging but manageable, especially with the reduced gravity making his movements more efficient. Despite his age, Jack moved with the confidence of someone who had kept his body battle-ready through daily discipline. After an hour of careful progress, Jack found what he was looking for: a small pool of clear liquid collected at the base of several crystal formations. It appeared to be water or something similar, condensed from the atmosphere by the crystals themselves. Testing unknown substances was always a risk, but dehydration was a certainty without water. Jack dipped his finger in the liquid, touched it to his lips, and waited. No burning sensation, no immediate adverse effects. He took a small sip, letting it sit in his mouth before swallowing. It tasted like water, perhaps slightly sweeter with a faint mineral quality. After waiting several minutes with no ill effects, Jack drank deeply. The liquid was refreshingly cool, instantly reviving him. He filled his security badge holder with as much as it could contain. Not ideal, but better than nothing. With his most immediate need addressed, Jack turned his attention toward the distant city. It would be at least a day's journey on foot across unfamiliar terrain. He needed to find shelter before nightfall. No telling what the temperature drop might be in this alien environment or what predators might emerge after dark. As Jack surveyed the landscape for suitable shelter, a flicker of movement caught his trained eye. Something was watching him from behind a cluster of crystal formations about 50 yards away. He couldn't make out details, but the size suggested something roughly humanoid. Jack slowly moved his hand toward his sidearm, not drawing it yet, but ready. "I see you there," he called out, his voice steady and calm. "I mean no harm. I'm just a visitor to your world." No response, but the figure shifted slightly, still concealed behind the crystals. Jack remained perfectly still, hands visible, presenting himself as non-threatening while remaining ready to defend himself if necessary. It was a posture he'd adopted countless times in foreign villages, trying to distinguish friend from foe. "I'm lost," he continued. "My name is Jack Reynolds. I came through some kind of gateway." At the word gateway, the figure noticeably reacted. After a moment's hesitation, it emerged from behind the crystals, moving with cautious grace. It was humanoid, but definitely not human. Tall and slender, with skin that shimmered with a faint silvery iridescence. Its features were elegant, almost elfin, with large almond-shaped eyes of deep violet. Silver hair was braided intricately down its back. It wore what appeared to be armor of an unknown material, form-fitting and functional. And it was pointing what was unmistakably a weapon at Jack. Sleek and alien in design, but a weapon nonetheless. "You speak of the sacred gateway," the being said in perfect English, though its voice had an unusual melodic quality. "How does a human come to know of this?" Jack blinked in surprise. "You speak English." The being tilted its head. "I speak the language of the warrior of Earth, as was foretold." "I don't know anything about prophecies or warriors," Jack said carefully. "I was security at a research facility. Something happened with a quantum experiment. Next thing I know, I'm here." The alien studied him intently, its violet eyes unblinking. "You wear the uniform of a guardian, yet you carry yourself as a warrior. Your eyes have seen battle." Jack nodded slowly. "I was a soldier for many years." "And your name?" "Jack Reynolds." "That's right." The being lowered its weapon slightly. "I am Theron's scout of the Zephorian Royal Guard. You will come with me." It wasn't a request. Jack weighed his options. Refusing might lead to conflict he wasn't prepared for. Cooperating would at least get him to civilization and possibly answers. "Lead the way," he said, keeping his hands visible. Theron gestured for Jack to walk ahead, keeping the weapon trained on his back. They moved through the Crystal Valley in silence for several minutes before the alien spoke again. "If you truly came through the gateway, then others will want to speak with you, especially the princess." "Princess?" Jack asked. Princess Elena, heir to the throne of Zephoria, she has studied the ancient prophecies her entire life. And these prophecies mention Earth. Theron's expression remained impassive. They speak of a warrior from a world called Earth who would return in Zephoria's darkest hour. A warrior who once walked among us centuries ago. Jack frowned. Return? That can't be me. I've never been here before. Perhaps, Theron said, studying Jack's face carefully, or perhaps you do not remember. Before Jack could respond, a sound like distant thunder rolled across the valley. Theron tensed, raising a hand for silence. Jack recognized the posture immediately, the alert readiness of a trained soldier sensing danger. What is it? Jack whispered. Draxan raiders, Theron replied quietly. They hunt near the gateway, seeking those who might emerge. Hostiles? Theron glanced at Jack with newfound interest at his use of military terminology. Yes, very hostile. They serve General Draven. Jack nodded, automatically falling into tactical assessment mode. How many what weapons capabilities? Usually groups of 5 or 6. Energy, weapons, shock grenades, some with battle claws. They use stealth tech, can become nearly invisible for short periods. Weaknesses. Their cloaking overheats quickly. They rely on intimidation and superior numbers. Jack processed this information rapidly. Options, hide or evade. Theron seemed surprised by Jack's calm professional questions. There's a defensive position in the rocks ahead. We could. A sizzling sound cut through the air as an energy bolt struck the ground near them. Theron shoved Jack down behind a crystal formation as more shots followed. Too late, Theron hissed. They've found us. Jack peered carefully around the crystal. 5 humanoid figures were advancing through the valley. They were bulkier than Theron, with reddish skin and what appeared to be natural armor plating across their shoulders and foreheads. Their weapons were rifle-like, glowing with ominous energy. 5 targets, advancing in standard sweep pattern, Jack observed quietly. They're trained but overconfident, spreading too thin. Theron stared at Jack. How do you know this? 20 years of combat operations, Jack replied simply. He assessed their situation with practiced efficiency. 2 against 5, unknown terrain, limited weapons. We need to separate them, reduce the numbers advantage. Without waiting for a response, Jack removed his tactical knife from its ankle sheath. I'll flank left, create a diversion. When they focus on me, take out the rear too. Rendezvous at those tall formations to the north. Theron seemed about to protest, then nodded sharply. Your plan is sound, but their weapons. I've dodged worse, Jack said with the grim confidence of someone who had indeed survived situations that should have killed him. On my mark, Jack counted down with his fingers. 3, 2, 1. He burst from cover, sprinting toward a cluster of smaller crystals. Energy bolts sizzled past him as the raiders shouted in an alien language. Jack moved with surprising agility for his age, zigzagging unpredictably as he'd been trained to do under fire. The diversion worked perfectly. 4 of the 5 raiders turned to focus on the human, firing wildly as Jack ducked and weaved between the crystal formations. The 5th raider, holding position at the rear, never saw Theron coming. The Zephorian scout moved with liquid grace, disabling the raider with a precise strike to what Jack assumed was a vulnerable point in their physiology. Jack reached his intended position and took cover, drawing his sidearm. The raiders, now down to 4, spread out to surround him. Just as Jack had predicted, they were overconfident, failing to secure their rear adequately. Theron took advantage, eliminating a 2nd raider silently. 3 left. Jack needed to even the odds further. He spotted a large crystal formation to his right that seemed particularly reactive to movement, glowing brighter as one of the raiders passed near it. Jack took careful aim and fired his sidearm at the base of the crystal. The bullet struck with a sharp crack, fracturing the structure. Energy surged from the broken crystal in a blinding flash, temporarily disorienting the nearby raider. Jack didn't hesitate. He emerged from cover and closed the distance to the stunned raider in seconds. His CO hand-to-hand combat training took over as he delivered a precise strike to what appeared to be the being's throat, following with a leg sweep that sent the much larger opponent crashing to the ground. Jack seized the alien as weapon and fired a burst of energy at the raider furthest from him, catching the enemy in the chest and sending him flying backward. 2 down by his hand, 2 by Theron's. 1 remained. The final raider, realizing the situation had turned against them, activated some kind of device on their wrist. Their forms shimmered, becoming translucent. the cloaking technology Theron had mentioned. Jack remained perfectly still, controlling his breathing, as he'd been taught in sniper school. He closed his eyes, relying on his other senses. A slight displacement of air to his left, the faint sound of footsteps on gravel. In one fluid motion, Jack pivoted and fired the alien weapon where he calculated the raider would be. The energy bolt struck true, connecting with the invisible figure and causing the cloaking to fail. The raider collapsed, the stealth device on their wrists sparking and smoking. Silence fell across the valley. Jack kept the weapon ready, scanning for additional threats. Theron emerged from the shadows, violet eyes wide with astonishment. "You fight like no human I've ever encountered," the scout said. Jack shrugged, checking the downed raiders to ensure they were no longer threats. None appeared to be fatally wounded, just incapacitated. "I was part of an elite unit, special operations." Theron approached cautiously. "The prophecy speaks of a warrior with skills beyond ordinary humans, one who could anticipate and counter any threat." "Not prophecy," Jack corrected. "Training and experience, lots of both." He examined the energy weapon he had acquired, familiarizing himself with its design. Strangely, the controls seemed almost intuitive to him, as if he'd handled similar weapons before. Theron noticed his facility with the alien technology. "You adapt quickly to our weapons." "Good ergonomics," Jack said, though privately he was puzzled by how natural the weapon felt in his hands. "We should move. There could be more of them." "Agreed. The outpost is half a day's journey north. Princess Elena is there overseeing border security." Jack nodded, his tactical mind already processing the new situation. He had weapons now, a potential ally in Theron, and a destination that might provide answers. It wasn't a bad improvement from waking up alone on an alien planet. As they moved north through the valley, Jack couldn't shake a strange sense of familiarity that was growing stronger. The landscape, while alien, triggered something in his mind. Not quite déjà vu, but something deeper, like remembering a dream long forgotten. "Theron," he said after they had been walking for some time, "you mentioned a prophecy about a warrior from Earth returning. What's the full story?" The scout glanced at him. "The ancient texts speak of a human warrior named Nathan who came to Zephoria 5 centuries ago. He fought alongside Princess Alara against the first Draxan invasion led by General Draven's ancestor. Nathan and Alara fell in love, their union blessing Zephoria with an era of peace and prosperity. And then, Nathan died in the final battle against the Draxan forces, but not before prophesying that he would return when Zephoria faced its greatest threat. Many believed it was just a legend, but Princess Elena has always been convinced of its truth." Jack absorbed this information silently. It sounded like a classic myth, the kind of story that developed around historical events over centuries of retelling. Yet he couldn't explain the strange connection he felt to this place or his inexplicable familiarity with Zephorian technology. "This Princess Elena," Jack said, changing the subject. "What's she like?" Theron's expression softened slightly. "Brilliant, determined, a master strategist and formidable warrior, but isolated by her position and the burden of royal expectations. Few see beyond her title to the person beneath." "Sounds lonely at the top," Jack murmured, recalling his own experiences as a SEAL team leader. "The weight of command, the distance it created between you and those you led." "She carries the future of Zephoria on her shoulders," Theron replied, "especially now with the Draxan forces growing stronger and rumors of a terrible new weapon." As they crested a ridge, a vast panorama opened before them. The northern horizon was dominated by towering mountains of deep purple and gray, their peaks lost in misty clouds. Nestled in a protected valley was what appeared to be a military outpost. Sleek structures of silver and crystal, with what Jack recognized as defensive positions and watchtowers. "The northern outpost," Theron announced. "Princess Elena has been here for 3 cycles, strengthening our border defenses against Draxan incursions." Jack studied the outpost with a professional eye. Good position, defensible, limited approaches, all of which can be monitored. Whoever designed it knows their business. "The princess designed it herself," Theron said, a note of pride in his voice. "She revolutionized our defensive strategies when she came of age." They began their descent toward the outpost. As they approached, Jack noticed increased activity. Guards taking positions, weapons being readied. They had been spotted. "They're on alert," Jack observed. "Do they think I'm a threat?" "A human appearing near the gateway." Yes, they will be cautious, but I will vouch for you. Theron activated a communication device on his wrist. Scout Theron returning with a visitor of great importance. Request audience with the princess. There was a pause, then a female voice responded. Identify visitor. Theron glanced at Jack. A human warrior who emerged from the gateway. He calls himself Jack Reynolds. Another longer pause. Then in a tone that conveyed carefully controlled surprise, bring him directly to the command center. Full security protocol. As they approached the outpost gates, a contingent of guards formed up to meet them. Their armor was more elaborate than Theron's, with insignias that Jack assumed denoted rank. They moved with precision and discipline that impressed even his veteran eye. Quite the welcome committee, Jack murmured. The princess takes security seriously, Theron replied quietly. The guards surrounded them, not exactly threatening, but definitely alert and ready. Jack kept his hands visible and his expression neutral. He'd been in similar situations before, entering warlords' compounds in Afghanistan, meeting tribal leaders in Iraq. The protocols of power were often similar regardless of the culture. They were escorted through the outpost, giving Jack a chance to observe the Zephyrian military up close. Their technology was advanced but practical, focused on efficiency rather than ostentation. The personnel moved with purpose, and Jack noted the clear chain of command evident in their interactions. The command center was at the heart of the outpost, a circular structure with transparent sections that offered a 360-degree view of the surroundings. Strategic displays glowed with information Jack couldn't read, but recognized as tactical data: troop positions, surveillance zones, threat assessments. And in the center stood a figure whose presence commanded the room. Princess Elena of Zephyria was tall and regal, with the same silvery iridescent skin as Theron, but more luminous, almost glowing with inner light. Her silver hair was partially braided at the sides, the rest flowing down her back. She wore armor that was both functional and elegant, clearly designed for actual combat rather than ceremonial purposes. But it was her eyes that captured Jack's attention. Deep violet like Theron's, but with an intensity and intelligence that seemed to look straight through him. They were the eyes of a natural leader, someone who had borne responsibility from a young age. Eyes he somehow recognized, though that was impossible. Elena studied Jack with equal intensity, her expression carefully controlled. So, she said, her voice carrying the same melodic quality as Theron's, but with greater authority. A human emerges from the gateway just as Draxan activity increases. Coincidence seems unlikely. Jack met her gaze steadily. I'm as surprised to be here as you are to see me, Your Highness. I was security at a research facility on Earth when something activated what you call the gateway. A security guard, Elena said, a hint of skepticism in her tone. Yet Theron reports you dispatched 4 Draxan raiders with exceptional skill. I had help, Jack said, nodding toward Theron. And before I was security, I was a soldier. Special forces. Earth has special forces. Elena's interest seemed genuine. Various types. I was part of a unit called the Navy SEALs. We specialized in high-risk operations, often behind enemy lines. Elena circled Jack, slowly assessing him from all angles. Your age suggests you are no longer active in this role. Jack couldn't help a small, rueful smile. Let's just say I was encouraged to retire. Apparently, I was too old for the field. Yet you fought with remarkable effectiveness today. Some skills you don't forget no matter how many years pass. Elena stopped her circling, facing Jack directly. What do you know of Zephyria, Jack Reynolds, of our history, our prophecies? Only what Theron told me on the way here. Something about a warrior from Earth who came centuries ago and promised to return. Nathan of Earth, Elena said, watching Jack's face carefully for any reaction. The warrior of prophecy who fought alongside my ancestor, Princess Alara. Jack shook his head. I'm not your prophesied warrior princess. I'm just a washed-up old soldier who got caught in some kind of interdimensional accident. Perhaps, Elena said, though her tone suggested she wasn't convinced. But your arrival coincides with troubling developments. General Draven has become increasingly aggressive, launching raids near the gateway. Our intelligence suggests he seeks something called the Eternal Shadow, a weapon of ancient origin that could devastate our world. Jack absorbed this information, his tactical mind automatically analyzing the situation. And you think my arrival and this weapon are connected? The prophecy states that the warrior of Earth would return when Zephoria faced its greatest threat. The timing is suggestive. Before Jack could respond, alarms blared throughout the command center. One of the tactical displays flashed with urgent data. A Zephorian officer approached Elena speaking rapidly in their native language. Elena's expression hardened. Prepare defensive positions, full alert. She turned to Jack. It seems we'll have to continue this discussion later. A Draxan strike force approaches from the east, much larger than their usual raiding parties. Jack stepped toward the tactical display, studying the information despite not understanding the symbols. The patterns were clear enough. Enemy forces converging on the outpost in a classic pincer movement. They're trying to surround you, he observed, cutting off retreat to the south while focusing main force from the east. Elena looked at him sharply. You can read our tactical displays. No, but military strategy has universal patterns. Jack pointed to several positions on the display. Your eastern defenses are strongest, which they'll expect. But your southern perimeter is vulnerable to flanking. That's where I'd focus if I were them. Elena studied the display again, then looked to her officers. Reinforce the southern approach. Prepare anti-stealth countermeasures. She turned back to Jack. It seems we may benefit from your military experience after all, Mr. Reynolds. Are you willing to assist in our defense, or would you prefer secure quarters until the threat passes? Jack almost smiled. After a decade of being sidelined, of watching younger men make decisions he knew were wrong, being asked for his expertise again felt like coming home. I'm not much for sitting on the sidelines, Princess. Never have been. Elena nodded, a hint of approval in her eyes. Then follow me, we have little time. As they moved through the outpost, personnel rushing to battle stations around them, Jack felt a strange sense of rightness. The chaos of combat preparation was familiar territory, but it was more than that. Something about this place, these people, especially Elena, triggered memories he couldn't possibly have. They reached an armory where Elena selected a sleek advanced weapon and handed it to Jack. Our standard energy rifle, similar to the one you used against the Raiders, but more powerful. Jack took the weapon again, struck by how natural it felt in his hands. He examined it briefly, instinctively understanding its function. Effective range: 300 meters with precision, 500 for suppressive fire. Jack nodded, checking the power cell and sighting mechanism. Recoil: minimal. The stabilization system compensates. They proceeded to a command post on the southern wall. The view confirmed what the tactical display had shown: a large force of Draxan warriors advancing across the valley, at least 50 strong. Their armor was more substantial than the raiders Jack had encountered earlier, and they moved with disciplined precision. Elena surveyed the approaching force grimly. They've never committed this many troops to a single attack before. Something has changed. Jack studied the enemy formation. They're being led by someone experienced. See how they use the terrain for cover, maintaining spacing to minimize casualties from area weapons. That's professional military tactics. As if in confirmation of his assessment, a figure appeared at the head of the Draxan formation, taller and broader than the others, wearing ornate armor that marked him as a commander. General Draven, Elena said, her voice tight with controlled anger. He usually commands from a distance. His direct involvement confirms this is no ordinary raid. Jack observed the general through a viewing device Elena provided. Draven was older than his troops, his reddish skin lined with age and his eyes reflecting decades of combat experience. He carried himself with the confidence of a veteran commander. He's looking for something specific, Jack said. This isn't just a territorial push. Elena nodded. The gateway, or you. Before Jack could respond, the first energy bolts from the Draxan force struck the outpost shields, lighting up the defensive barrier with ripples of power. The battle had begun. What followed was chaos, but organized chaos, the kind Jack had lived in for much of his career. The Zephorian defenders responded with disciplined fire, their tactics solid but predictable. The Draxan forces under Draven's command adapted quickly, exploiting patterns they'd clearly studied. Jack found himself naturally falling into an advisory role, pointing out vulnerabilities and suggesting countermeasures. To his surprise, Elena listened, implementing his suggestions without hesitation. They worked together with an uncanny synchronization, anticipating each other's thoughts and actions. When the southern perimeter came under heavy assault, Jack and Elena moved to reinforce it personally. They fought side by side, covering each other with an instinctive understanding that should have been impossible between strangers. Jack wielded the energy rifle with unexpected proficiency, his shots finding vulnerable points in Drax's armor that he somehow knew to target. Elena fought with remarkable skill, her movements fluid and precise energy, blades slicing through the air with lethal grace. In the midst of the battle, a squad of Draxan warriors activated stealth technology, becoming nearly invisible as they breached the outer defenses. Jack spotted the subtle distortion in the air that betrayed their presence. "Infiltrators, 3 o'clock," he shouted to Elena, swinging his weapon toward the threat. Elena reacted instantly, throwing what appeared to be a small disc into the area Jack had indicated. It detonated with a pulse of energy that disrupted the stealth field, revealing 6 Draxan warriors advancing on their position. Jack and Elena moved in perfect coordination, each covering the other's flanks as they engaged the infiltrators. Jack's decades of close-quarters combat experience merged with an inexplicable familiarity with Zephorian tactics. Elena fought with the skill of someone who had trained her entire life, yet adapted seamlessly to Jack's style. Together, they neutralized the threat with an efficiency that drew looks of astonishment from the Zephorian defenders nearby. As the last infiltrator fell, Jack and Elena stood back to back, scanning for further threats. The main Draxan force was beginning to fall back, their coordinated assault breaking down under the unexpected defense strategies. "They're retreating," Elena said, her breathing only slightly elevated despite the intense combat. But Draven wouldn't withdraw so easily unless a massive explosion rocked the northern section of the outpost. Alarms blared as a secondary attack force was detected approaching from that direction. A diversion, Jack realized. The southern attack was just to focus our attention while they positioned their main force to the north. Elena's expression hardened. "The command center is vulnerable from that approach. We need to—" Her words were cut short as the ground beneath them suddenly trembled violently. This was no weapon impact. The entire area shook with increasing intensity. Cracks appeared in the ground, spreading outward like a web. "Earthquake!" Jack asked, struggling to maintain his balance. Lena's eyes widened. "No, something else. Something, Ma." With a deafening roar, the earth between the outpost and the retreating Draxan forces split open. Jack and Elena were thrown to the ground as a massive structure began to emerge from beneath the surface. Ancient stone and crystal rising impossibly from the depths. The fighting on both sides ceased as everyone watched in awe. The structure continued to rise until it stood fully revealed. A temple of clearly ancient design, its surface covered in glowing runes and symbols. It pulsed with energy that seemed to respond to the presence of the combatants around it. "The Temple of Eternity," Elena whispered, her voice filled with wonder and disbelief. "It's not supposed to exist anymore. It was lost centuries ago during the Great Cataclysm." Jack stared at the temple, and something stirred deep in his mind. Images flashed before his eyes. The same temple, but intact and magnificent, while surrounded by celebrations. Himself, but not himself, standing beside a woman who looked remarkably like Elena, both dressed in ceremonial attire. "I've seen it before," he said, the words escaping before he could stop them. Elena turned to him sharply. "What did you say?" Jack shook his head, trying to clear the impossible visions. "I don't know. For a moment it seemed familiar, but that can't be." Another tremor shook the ground stronger than before. The fighting had completely stopped now, both sides transfixed by the temple's appearance. From the Draxan lines, General Draven stepped forward, his gaze fixed on the temple with an expression of triumph and awe. "The prophecy fulfills itself," his voice carried across the battlefield. "The temple appears when the warrior returns, and with it, the power of the eternal shadow." Elena gripped Jack's arm. "We have to reach the temple before he does. The legends say it contains both salvation and destruction, depending on who awakens its power." Jack looked at her, seeing the urgency in those violet eyes that somehow called to something deep within him. "Lead the way, Princess." As they moved toward the temple, the ground continuing to shake beneath their feet, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking a path he'd traveled before. Every step felt like déjà vu, every moment laden with significance beyond his understanding. Whatever awaited them within that ancient structure, Jack sensed it would answer the questions that had begun to form since he arrived on this alien world. Questions about his inexplicable connection to Zephoria, to Elena, and to a warrior who had supposedly lived and died 5 centuries ago. The Temple of Eternity beckoned its mysteries, promising either answers or oblivion. And Jack Reynolds, former Navy SEAL and reluctant security guard, now potential prophesied savior, had no choice but to follow where destiny led. As Jack and Elena approached the ancient temple, the ground continued to tremble beneath their feet. The structure loomed before them, a monument of forgotten power now awakened after centuries of dormancy. Its crystalline spires caught the light of Zephoria's twin suns, fracturing it into prismatic patterns that danced across the battlefield. "We need to hurry," Elena said, her voice tight with urgency. "Draven's forces are regrouping." Jack studied the temple's facade, noting the intricate patterns carved into its surface. Strange symbols pulsed with inner light responding to their proximity. "Any idea what we'll find in there?" "The ancient texts speak only in riddles," Elena replied, her eyes scanning the approaching Draxan forces. "They say the temple holds truth for the truthful and darkness for the deceiver." A blast of energy struck nearby, showering them with debris. General Draven was advancing his troops, forming a wedge formation behind him. "The temple recognizes its rightful master." Draven's voice boomed across the battlefield. "Step aside, princess. Your ancestors' folly ends today." Elena drew her energy blade, its azure glow illuminating her determined face. "We'll hold them off as long as we can. The temple must be reached." Jack's tactical mind assessed their position. They were exposed, caught between the temple and Draven's advancing forces. The remaining Zephorian defenders were regrouping, but they were outnumbered and outflanked. "I have a better idea," Jack said, spotting a narrow pathway leading around the temple's western side. "We split up. Your troops create a diversion to the east while we circle around and enter from the rear." Elena's eyes widened slightly. "That's exactly what I was thinking." Jack nodded, the strange synchronicity between them no longer surprising. He keyed the communication device Elena had given him earlier. "All units concentrate fire on the eastern approach. Maximum suppression, minimal exposure." The Zephorian commanders acknowledged without question, accepting Jack's authority as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Elena gave rapid orders in her native language, positioning her elite guards to cover their movement. "Ready?" Jack asked, checking his weapon's power cell. Elena nodded, her silver hair catching the light. "Stay close. The temple's defenses may still be active." They moved swiftly along the temple's perimeter, using the structure itself as cover from Draven's forces. Jack noticed how Elena matched his pace perfectly, anticipating his movements as if they had trained together for years. The coordination felt effortless, instinctual. As they reached the western face of the temple, they discovered an entrance partially concealed by crystalline formations. The doorway was smaller than the main entrance, its frame inscribed with the same glowing symbols that covered the rest of the structure. "A service entrance," Elena whispered, "used by the temple attendants in ancient times." Jack approached the doorway cautiously. As he neared, the symbols brightened, pulsing in a rhythmic pattern that seemed to respond to his presence. He reached out to touch the crystal frame, and a jolt of energy surged through his body, not painful but intense. Images flashed through his mind, himself in unfamiliar armor, leading troops against a Draxan horde. Standing in this very temple beside a woman with Elena's face, their hands joined in some kind of ceremony. A terrible battle where darkness consumed everything. Jack staggered back, gasping. "Did you see that?" Elena caught his arm, steadying him. "I saw nothing." "What happened?" Before Jack could answer, the doorway slid open with a sound of grinding stone. Beyond lay a corridor illuminated by the same ethereal light that emanated from the temple's exterior. "It recognized you," Elena said, her voice a mixture of awe and suspicion. "The temple responded to your presence." Jack stared at the open doorway, unable to explain what had just occurred. "We should keep moving. Draven's forces won't be distracted for long." They entered the temple, cautiously, weapons ready. The corridor stretched before them, its walls lined with crystal formations that pulsed with soft light. The air inside felt charged, as if saturated with some form of energy that made the hairs on Jack's arms stand on end. "This technology," Jack murmured, examining the self-illuminating crystals. "It's unlike anything I've seen, yet somehow familiar." Elena moved beside him, her eyes scanning their surroundings with professional precision. The temple was built during the First Age, when our ancestors' understanding of crystal technology was at its peak. Most of this knowledge was lost during the Great Cataclysm. They proceeded deeper into the temple, following the main corridor as it descended gradually. The passage opened into a circular chamber with multiple doorways leading off in different directions. At the center stood a pedestal topped with a rotating crystal sphere that projected images onto the surrounding walls, star systems, planets, and what appeared to be wormholes connecting them. A navigation chamber, Elena said, approaching the pedestal. The ancients used the temple as an observatory to study potential gateway connections. Jack studied the projected images, recognizing one particular blue-green planet. That's Earth, Elena nodded. The texts speak of multiple worlds connected through the gateway network. Earth was special, the only world whose inhabitants could naturally interface with our technology. A distant explosion shook the temple bust, falling from the ancient ceiling. The diversion wouldn't hold Draven's forces back much longer. Which way? Jack asked, eyeing the multiple exits from the chamber. Elena hesitated, studying the layout. The central chamber should be deeper in, but I'm not sure which. Jack found himself moving toward the rightmost doorway, drawn by an inexplicable certainty. This way. Elena followed without question, her trust in his instincts immediate and complete. The corridor beyond narrowed, descending deeper into the temple's foundation. The walls here were covered with intricate murals depicting scenes of battle and alliance, humans and Zephyrians fighting side by side against Draxan forces. One image in particular caught Jack's attention, a human warrior standing with a Zephyrian princess, their hands joined over what appeared to be a crystal, similar to the one they'd seen in the navigation chamber. The warrior's face was worn by time, but something about his posture, the set of his shoulders, felt hauntingly familiar. Nathan and Alara, Elena said softly, noticing Jack's focus on the mural. My ancestor in the Warrior of Earth. Jack touched the faded image, tracing the outline of the human figure. What exactly does the prophecy say about his return? Elena's voice took on a formal quality, as if reciting sacred text. When darkness threatens to consume all light, the warrior shall return from beyond the stars, bearing the same soul, but new flesh to complete what was begun. And you believe that's me? Jack asked, turning to face her. Elena's violet eyes met his, searching. I believe in the prophecy. Whether you or its fulfillment remains to be seen. Another explosion closer this time interrupted their conversation. The temple trembled, crystal formations resonating with the impact. They've breached the main entrance. Elena said, her hand moving to her weapon. We need to hurry. They continued deeper, the passage widening into another chamber. This one was smaller than the navigation room, but more ornate. Its walls were lined with niches containing crystalline artifacts of various shapes and sizes. At the center stood a raised platform with 2 handprint impressions carved into its surface. Elena approached it reverently. The communion platform. According to legend, it allows access to ancestral memories, a way to connect with those who came before. Jack studied the platform skeptically. How does it work? The ancient texts say that blood of the royal line combined with that of the warrior would activate it. Elena drew a small blade from her armor. Are you willing to try? Jack considered the request. His rational mind, the battle-hardened seal who trusted only in what he could see and touch, screamed caution. Yet something deeper pulled him forward, a sense of purpose he hadn't felt since being forced into retirement. Let's do it. Elena made a small cut on her palm, then handed the blade to Jack. He did the same, the sharp sting barely registering after a lifetime of far worse injuries. Together they approached the platform and placed their bleeding hands on the impressions. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. The platform illuminated with blinding intensity, energy surging up their arms and throughout their bodies. Jack felt his consciousness expanding, connecting with something vast and ancient. Images flooded his mind, not fragmented glimpses this time, but a continuous flow of memories that weren't his own, yet somehow were. He saw through Nathan's eyes arrival on Zephyria through a gateway accident centuries ago, initial distrust and hostility from the Zephyrians, proving himself in battle against the first Draxan invasion, meeting Princess Alara in their gradual bond of respect and then love, their union that brought peace between worlds. The final battle where Nathan sacrificed himself to seal away the eternal Shadow Draven's ancestors' ultimate weapon. The memories shifted, showing the aftermath, Alara's grief. The birth of their child, a half-human, half-Zephyrian, who united both bloodlines. The prophecy of return. And finally, the creation of the temple as both monument and mechanism for Nathan's eventual rebirth. Jack gasped as the connection broke, staggering back from the platform. Beside him, Elena appeared equally shaken, her violet eyes wide with revelation. "You saw," he asked, knowing the answer. "Everything," she whispered. "Your past life, Nathan's life, and my ancestor Ilara." She stared at him with new understanding. "You really are him, your soul reborn in a new body." Jack struggled to process the flood of memories now intermingled with his own. "I fought here before, died here." He looked at his hands and older, weathered by a different life, yet somehow the same. "And you, Ilara, we were bonded," Elena finished. "Our bloodlines joined." The implications were staggering. Jack Reynolds, former SEAL, failed team leader, forgotten security guard, was the reincarnation of a legendary warrior who had saved an alien civilization centuries ago. The connection he'd felt to this world, to its technology, to Elena herself, it hadn't been imagination. It had been memory. Before they could process this revelation further, the chamber door burst open. 4 Draxan warriors entered, weapons raised. Behind them strode General Draven himself, his ancient face twisted in a triumphant smile. "How convenient," the general said, his voice surprisingly melodious for such an imposing figure. "The princess and the supposed warrior delivering themselves directly to me." Jack moved instinctively, placing himself between Elena and the Draxans. His hand went to his weapon, but Draven raised his palm in warning. "I wouldn't advise that, warrior, or should I call you Nathan?" Draven's smile widened. "Yes, I know who you were, just as I am descended from the one you defeated centuries ago." Elena stepped forward, her posture regal, despite the danger. "What do you want, Draven?" "Why this attack now, after decades of uneasy peace?" Draven gestured around the chamber. "The temple has awakened. The final piece of the prophecy falls into place." His eyes fixed on Jack. "His return signals that the eternal shadow can be accessed once more." Jack felt a chill at the words, the memories from the communion platform providing context. "The weapon your ancestor tried to use. The one I, Nathan, died to seal away." "Not just a weapon," Draven corrected. "The ultimate power, capable of consuming all energy, all light, leaving only those who control it to reshape reality as they see fit." He approached the platform, studying it with hungry eyes. "For 5 centuries, my family has waited, preparing for this moment." Elena's hand moved subtly toward her blade. "The shadow was sealed away for good reason, Draven. It cannot be controlled. It will consume everything, including you." Draven laughed, the sound echoing through the crystalline chamber. "Such limited vision, princess. Your ancestor feared power. Mine embraced it." He turned to his warriors. "Succor them. We'll need their blood for the final ritual." The Draxan warriors advanced, but Jack was already moving. His body responded with the combined instincts of a SEAL's training and Nathan's combat experience. He struck the nearest warrior with precision, targeting a weak point in Draxan physiology that Nathan had discovered centuries ago. Elena moved with equal skill, her energy blade activating in a flash of azure light. They fought back-to-back, their movements perfectly synchronized, if they had trained together for years. 2 Draxan warriors fell quickly, but the remaining 2 were more cautious, keeping their distance while firing energy weapons. Jack ducked behind a crystal formation for cover, pulling Elena with him as energy bolts shattered artifacts around them. "The southern exit," Elena whispered, gesturing toward a partially concealed doorway. "It leads deeper into the temple." Jack nodded, formulating a plan. "On my mark, break for the exit. I'll cover you." "We go together," Elena countered, her tone leaving no room for argument. Jack almost smiled despite the situation. Her stubbornness felt familiar, echoing across centuries. "Together then, 3, 2, 1. They burst from cover simultaneously, Jack firing with precision, while Elena deflected energy bolts with her blade. They reached the exit as Draven shouted commands to his remaining warriors. The general himself remained calm, watching their escape with an expression of almost paternal amusement. "Run, warrior," he called after them. "It changes nothing. The shadow will rise again." The passage beyond was narrower, descending steeply into the temple's foundation. They moved quickly, the sounds of pursuit fading behind them. The walls here were different, darker crystal veined with what looked like metallic circuitry, pulsing with deep crimson light. "We're entering the temple's core," Elena said, her breath slightly vapored. These sections were sealed after the Great Cataclysm. No one has walked these halls for centuries. The passage opened into a vast circular chamber that took Jack's breath away. The ceiling soared hundreds of feet above them, while the floor descended in concentric circles toward a central pit. Suspended above this pit was a crystal sphere, larger than any they'd seen before, 20 feet in diameter, at least pulsing with energy that shifted between brilliant white and ominous black. "The heart of eternity," Elena whispered, awe evident in her voice. "I thought it was just legend." Jack stared at the massive crystal, feeling both attraction and repulsion. Nathan's memories provided context. This was the focal point of the temple, a nexus of power that connected to the gateway network spanning multiple worlds. It was also the prison that contained the eternal shadow. "We sealed it here," Jack said, Nathan's memories surfacing. "After Draven's ancestor tried to harness the shadow's power, the casualties were, catastrophic." Elena moved to a control pedestal near the chamber's edge. "These readings, the containment field is weakening. Draven was right about one thing: the shadow is becoming active again." Jack joined her, studying the alien controls with newfound understanding. "The temple didn't rise because of my return. It rose because the seal is failing." "Which means the prophecy was a warning, not just a prediction," Elena concluded. "You were meant to return when the shadow threatened to escape." Jack accessed more of Nathan's memories, sifting through battlefield strategies and diplomatic missions to find information about the shadow. Nathan didn't fully understand what it was: some kind of extra-dimensional entity that feeds on energy. The more power used against it, the stronger it grows. "How did you defeat it before?" Elena asked. Jack's expression darkened as the memory surfaced. "We didn't defeat it. We only contained it using a combination of earth science and Zephorian crystal technology. Nathan, I created a self-sustaining prison powered by my own life force." He looked at his hands, feeling the phantom pain of that final sacrifice. "I died to seal it away." Elena's eyes widened with understanding. "That's why you had to return. The seal was tied to your life essence, your soul. As it weakens in this world, you're drawn back to renew it." A slow, mocking applause interrupted them. General Draven emerged from another entrance to the chamber, flanked by his remaining warriors. "Very good, princess," he said, advancing confidently. "You've always been the scholar, but you've missed one crucial detail." He pointed to the great crystal hovering above the pit. "The shadow doesn't just consume energy, it transforms it. With the right vessel, its power can be channeled, controlled." Jack stepped forward, positioning himself between Draven and the crystal. "Your ancestor thought the same thing. He was wrong. Thousands died." Draven's expression hardened. "My ancestor was a visionary, but he lacked the proper preparation." He pulled a smaller crystal from his armor, a shard that pulsed with the same alternating light and darkness as the Great Sphere. 5 centuries of research. 5 centuries of selective breeding to create the perfect genetic key. He held the shard aloft. "My body is engineered to channel the shadow's power." "You'll destroy yourself and half the planet," Elena warned. "I will ascend," Draven countered. "Become more than any Zephorian or human has ever been." He gestured to his warriors. "Take them. Their blood will strengthen the transfer ritual." Jack's mind raced, evaluating options. The chamber had multiple levels but limited cover. 2 exits that he could see. 7 Draxan warriors plus Draven himself. His alien weapon was at half power, and Elena's blade, while deadly in close combat, would be less effective against ranged attacks. Then he noticed something, a pattern in the floor's design that matched symbols from the communion platform. Nathan's memories provided insight. The chamber was designed with multiple defensive systems, accessible only to those with royal blood or the warrior's genetic signature. He caught Elena's eye, a plan forming. "The floor," he murmured. "Third ring, northern quadrant." Elena's quick intake of breath confirmed she understood. As Draven's warriors advanced, they moved toward the position Jack had indicated. Draven watched with amusement, assuming they were backing away in fear. "Nowhere to run," the general taunted. "Accept your role in history. Your blood will fuel my ascension, just as your ancestors' union created the conditions for it." Jack reached the spot he'd identified, pulling Elena close beside him. "Now," he shouted. They pressed their hands to the floor simultaneously, their still healing cuts from the communion platform reopening. Blood, human and Zephorian, touched the crystalline surface. The effect was immediate. The floor beneath Draven and his warriors illuminated with brilliant energy, forming a containment field that immobilized them. Draven roared in fury, struggling against the invisible force to no avail. Temple security protocols, Elena explained, a hint of satisfaction in her voice, keyed to royal blood and the warrior's genetic signature. Draven ceased his struggle, his ancient face settling into an expression of cold calculation. Clever, but temporary. The temple's systems are degrading after centuries of dormancy. This field won't hold forever. As if confirming his words, the energy flickered briefly. Jack estimated they had minutes at most before the field collapsed. "We need to reseal the shadow," he said, turning to the great crystal, "before Draven can access it." Elena studied the control pedestal with growing concern. The original containment protocol required a life essence as the power source. Nathan's sacrifice. She looked at Jack, her violet eyes troubled. To renew the seal would require the same. Jack understood the implication immediately. History repeating itself. Nathan had died to create the seal. Jack would need to sacrifice himself to renew it. The revelation should have terrified him. Instead, he felt a strange peace what awaited him on Earth. A lonely apartment, a meaningless draw. The quiet desperation of a warrior with no more battles to fight, watching his skills and purpose fade with age. Here he had found meaning again. Connection. A battle worth fighting. "Tell me what to do," he said simply. Elena's expression shifted to one of determination. "There must be another way. Nathan didn't have time to find an alternative solution, but we have his knowledge and experience now." She gestured to the control pedestal. "Help me understand these systems." Together they examined the ancient controls, Jack's memories of Nathan's work, combining with Elena's scholarly knowledge of Zephorian technology. The containment field holding Draven flickered again, growing weaker. "There," Elena said suddenly, indicating a sequence of symbols. "Nathan designed the seal using quantum entanglement principles, binding his life essence to the Shadow's prison. But the entanglement doesn't necessarily require death." She looked up at Jack, hope brightening her eyes. "It requires a connection across dimensions, a bridge between worlds." Jack began to understand. The gateway. It's not just a portal between planets, it's a dimensional bridge. Exactly. If we can stabilize the gateway connection and anchor it to the containment field, we create a self-sustaining energy loop. Jack finished the solution, becoming clear. Using the dimensional barrier itself was the power source rather than a life essence. They worked quickly, Jack's fingers moving across the controls, with certainty born of Nathan's memories. The containment field around Draven flickered again, failing for several seconds before re-establishing itself. The general smiled coldly, knowing his freedom was only moments away. "Almost there," Elena said, making a final adjustment to the control sequence. "The gateway connection is aligning with the containment parameters." Jack felt a sudden stabbing pain in his chest, a phantom echo of Nathan's death centuries ago. The great crystal above the pit pulsed more rapidly, darkness threatening to overwhelm the light within it. "It's responding to your presence," Elena realized. "The original seal recognizes you." Jack approached the edge of the pit, feeling the pull of the massive crystal. "It needs to transfer from me to the new containment system." "Be careful," Elena warned. "The shadow will resist. It's been feeding on the essence of your soul for centuries." Jack extended his hands toward the crystal, feeling the conflicting energies within it, light and darkness, creation and consumption locked in eternal struggle. The pain in his chest intensified as the original connection reasserted itself, the shadow reaching for the soul it had been feeding upon. Behind them, the containment field collapsed completely. Draven and his warriors were free, but the general made no move to attack. Instead, he watched with calculating eyes, the crystal shard still clutched in his hand. "Complete the transfer, warrior," he said, his voice almost gentle. "Open the pathway between dimensions." Jack realized with horror that this had been Draven's plan all along. The attack, the pursuit into the temple, all designed to force them to reopen the dimensional gateway that would allow the shadow to be accessed. "Elena, wait!" he shouted, but it was too late. The final sequence activated. Energy surged from the control pedestal to the great crystal, which blazed with blinding light. Jack felt the connection to his soul straining, pulling in two directions, toward the new containment system and toward Draven's crystal shard, which now glowed with matching energy. "At last," Draven breathed, raising the shard higher, "the shadow answers to a new master." The chamber trembled as power flowed between dimensions. Jack fell to his knees, caught in the middle of forces he could barely comprehend. Elena rushed to his side, supporting him as the transfer continued. "Fight it, Jack," she urged. "The connection is still anchored to your soul. You can influence where the power flows." Jack looked up at the great crystal, seeing darkness spreading within it as the shadow fed on the dimensional energy. Then he looked at Draven, the general's face transformed by greedy triumph as the shard in his hand pulsed with stolen power. In that moment, Jack understood what needed to be done. Not a sacrifice of life, but a sacrifice of return. Nathan's memories showed him the pattern, the cycle of rebirth that had drawn him back to Zephoria. "I know how to stop it," he gasped through the pain, "but I'll need your help." Elena's eyes met his trust absolute. "Tell me." "The blood bond, not to seal the shadow this time, but to redirect it." Understanding dawned in her expression. She drew her blade, reopening the cut on her palm, then did the same for Jack. Their blood mingled once more as they pressed their hands together, completing a circuit that had begun centuries ago with Nathan and Alara. Power surged through them, not the consuming darkness of the shadow, but something older and deeper. The genetic memory of two bloodlines, human and Zephorian, joined across time and space. Jack directed this power toward the great crystal, using it to reshape the containment field from within. Instead of sealing the shadow away, he transformed the prison into a siphon, drawing the entity's power out and dispersing it harmlessly across dimensions. Draven screamed in fury as the energy flow reversed. The shard in his hand cracked, dark energy escaping in tendrils that withered his flesh where they touched. His warriors backed away in terror as their leader began to decay before their eyes, consumed by the very power he had sought to control. "No!" Draven howled, his voice distorting as the shadow's essence invaded his body. "I am the vessel, I am the master." "The shadow has no master," Jack said, rising to his feet with Elena's support. "Only victims." The general's body convulsed as darkness consumed him from within. His form collapsed inward, imploding into a singularity that vanished with a thunderclap of energy, taking the broken shard with it. Where Draven had stood, only a scorch mark remained. The remaining Draxan warriors dropped their weapons, falling to their knees in surrender or terror. In the center of the chamber, the great crystal stabilized, pulsing with steady golden light. The oppressive darkness within it was gone, dispersed across the dimensional barrier, where it could no longer coalesce into a single destructive force. Jack stared at the crystal, feeling the connection to his soul fading. Not severed, but transformed, no longer a prison powered by his life essence, but a balanced system drawing energy from the dimensional boundary itself. "It's done," he said softly. "The shadow is neutralized." Elena still held his hand, their blood mingling. "And the cycle of rebirth. Will you be drawn back again when you die on Earth?" Jack turned to her, suddenly understanding the full implications of what they had accomplished. There is no back anymore. The dimensional anchor that tied Nathan's soul to Earth was part of the original seal. He looked down at their joined hands. "I've broken the cycle." Elena's eyes widened. "You mean I'm free to choose?" Jack said, the reality of it washing over him. For the first time in 5 centuries, this soul can determine its own path. Around them, the temple hummed with renewed energy, its systems reawakening after centuries of dormancy. The crisis had passed, but Jack knew their journey was just beginning. Draven's followers remained leaderless, but dangerous. The revelation of the temple's existence would send shockwaves through Zephorian society. And somewhere on Earth, a quantum gateway had opened once and might open again. But those were challenges for tomorrow. For now, as Jack stood beside Elena in the ancient temple that had drawn him across dimensions, he felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: purpose. Not the grim determination of a soldier following orders, but the clear-eyed conviction of a man who had found his place in the universe. The cycle of rebirth had ended. A new chapter was beginning. The Temple of Eternity stood radiant in the morning light, its crystalline surfaces gleaming as if newly crafted rather than ancient beyond memory. The battle damage had somehow healed overnight, the structure repairing itself through some forgotten technology. Zephorian troops secured the perimeter, while scientists and scholars cautiously explored the outer chambers, their excitement palpable even from a distance. Jack stood on a ridge overlooking the scene, the twin suns warming his weathered face. He wore a new set of clothing provided by Elena's staff, A Zephorian uniform modified to fit his human frame, comfortable yet distinctive enough to mark him as neither fully Zephorian nor a typical human visitor. It suited him, this in-between state. Quite the operation down there, he observed as Elena approached. She'd traded her battle armor for formal attire befitting her royal status, though Jack noticed the energy blade still secured at her hip. Some habits transcended lifetimes. The High Council arrived an hour ago, Elena said, coming to stand beside him. They're calling it the revelation of ages. Historians, scientists, religious leaders, all demanding access. And you're keeping them at bay. Elena smiled slightly. For now, the temple's secrets aren't for exploitation. They require, context. Jack understood her caution. The knowledge contained within those ancient walls could transform Zephorian society or destabilize it completely. Power without wisdom was a recipe for disaster. He'd seen that truth play out across battlefields on Earth. What about Draven's forces? He asked, shifting to tactical concerns. Scattered but not defeated. With Draven gone, they've fallen back to their traditional territories. Elena's expression darkened. But someone will rise to fill the power vacuum. It's only a matter of time. Jack nodded, having witnessed similar patterns in the aftermath of removing dictators and warlords on Earth. And the gateway. Any progress on understanding the connection to Earth? Our scientists are working with the temple's navigation systems. They believe we can establish controlled connections, limited, carefully monitored pathways, rather than the unstable rupture that brought you here. She turned to face him directly. Which raises the question we've been avoiding. Jack met her gaze, knowing exactly what she meant. The question that had hung between them since the confrontation with Draven. With the ancient soul binding broken and the shadow neutralized, Jack was no longer tethered to Earth or Zephoria. For the first time in 5 centuries, he or the soul that had once been Nathan had a choice. I've been thinking about that, he said, looking back toward the temple. What would happen if I returned to Earth? Elena considered the question carefully. You would resume your life as Jack Reynolds, I suppose. Return to your security position, your apartment. Continue as you were. The words hung in the air, starkly outlining the emptiness that had defined his existence before coming to Zephoria. A meaningless job. A solitary apartment. No family, few friends. The slow fade of a warrior whose time had passed, watching his skills and purpose diminish with each passing year. And if I stayed, Elena's voice remained measured, though Jack caught the subtle shift in her posture, a slight straightening of her shoulders, a tightening of control. You would be welcomed as an honored ally. Your knowledge of Earth and your military expertise would be invaluable as we establish formal relations between our worlds. Jack smiled faintly at her diplomatic answer. That's what you tell the High Council. I'm asking what you think, Elena. A moment of silence passed between them, weighted with unspoken implications. The bond they shared, genetic memory, shared blood, the echo of Nathan and Alara's connection complicated everything. I think, Elena said finally, that you would find purpose here, not just as Nathan's successor or a figure from prophecy, but as yourself, Jack Reynolds, with all your experiences and skills. She met his gaze directly. I think you might find belonging in time. Before Jack could respond, a Zephorian messenger approached, saluting Elena with practiced precision. Your Highness, the Council requests your presence. The Draxan territories have sent an envoy seeking audience. Elena's expression remained neutral, but Jack noted the subtle tension in her jaw. Inform them I'll arrive shortly. The messenger departed and Elena turned back to Jack. Duty calls. We'll continue this discussion later. Jack nodded. I'll be here. He watched her descend toward the temple, her silver hair catching the sunlight. The connection between them was undeniable, yet complex. Part ancient memory, part new bond forged through combat and shared purpose. Whatever decision he made would need to account for that complexity. Jack remained on the ridge, lost in thought, until a familiar voice interrupted his contemplation. The prodigal warrior pondering his fate. Jack turned to find Sarath, Elena's advisor, approaching with measured steps. The older Zephorian moved with the careful precision of someone managing chronic pain, an old battle injury, Jack guessed. Despite never having met Sarath before arriving on Zephoria, Jack felt he knew him through Nathan's memories. Loyal advisor, skilled diplomat, surrogate father figure to Elena. after the king's illness began. "Serath," Jack acknowledged. "I was wondering when we'd speak. I thought it best to let you acclimate before adding my voice to the chorus demanding your attention." Serath came to stand beside him, surveying the activity below. "Quite the commotion you have caused, warrior of Earth." "Not intentionally," Jack replied. "The most significant events rarely happen by design." Serath studied Jack's face with keen intelligence. "You've remembered much, haven't you, Nathan's memories, his connection to our world?" Jack nodded. "Enough to be confused about where he ends and I begin. An existential dilemma few would understand." Serath gestured toward the landscape beyond the temple. "Walk with me. These old legs benefit from movement, and conversations of this nature deserve privacy." They followed a path leading away from the temple grounds toward a crystalline formation that provided natural seating with a view of the distant mountains. Jack noted how the Zephyrian moved with the same careful evaluation of surroundings that he himself employed the habits of someone who had survived conflict. "You were a soldier once," Jack observed. Serath smiled faintly. "Is it so obvious?" "To another soldier, yes. Elite Guard Royal Protection Detail before moving to advisory roles." Serath lowered himself onto a crystal outcropping. "Like you, I found my later years defined more by guidance than direct action, though perhaps with less dramatic interruption." Jack appreciated the older Zephyrian's dry humor. "What can you tell me that Elena won't?" Serath's expression grew serious. "The political reality. Elena speaks of choice of purpose, noble concepts. But your presence here complicates an already fragile situation." He gestured toward the temple. "The reappearance of the Temple of Eternity has religious significance beyond its technological value. Many see it as confirmation that the old prophecies are literal truth." "Including the part about the warrior and the princess?" Jack asked, already anticipating the answer. "Especially that part." Serath sighed. 5 centuries ago, Nathan and Alara's union wasn't just romantic, it was political. It unified factions, created legitimacy. The bloodline they established, Elena's lineage, has ruled since then, partly on the strength of that legacy. The implications were clear. So, if the warrior has returned, some will expect history to repeat itself completely, Serath confirmed. A symbolic reunification of Earth and Zephyria through royal marriage. Jack processed this information, understanding why Elena had been careful in their earlier conversation. "And those who don't want closer ties with Earth will see you as a threat to be removed," Serath said bluntly. Draven was merely the most aggressive voice in a larger movement that fears outside influence. With him gone, others will take up the cause, perhaps more subtly but no less determined. "You're saying that my presence could destabilize the planet. I'm saying your choices carry weight beyond personal preference." Serath met Jack's gaze directly. "If you stay, it cannot be as merely an honored guest or military advisor. You would become a symbol either of unity or division, depending on your actions." Jack looked toward the distant mountains, considering Serath's words. On Earth, he had been forgotten, a relic passed over for younger, less experienced operatives. Here, his very existence was politically significant. "And if I return to Earth," Serath's expression softened, "then Elena would continue as she has a capable ruler navigating difficult circumstances. The old prophecies would be reinterpreted as metaphorical rather than literal. Life would proceed." He paused. "But I suspect the connection you've found here would leave a void in both your souls." Before Jack could respond, a distant alarm sounded from the direction of the temple. Both men tensed, years of training, triggering immediate alertness. "Proximity warning," Serath explained, rising quickly despite his evident discomfort. "Something's approaching from the northwest quadrant." They hurried back toward the temple, Jack automatically checking the energy weapon at his hip. As they crested the ridge, they saw Zephyrian troops forming defensive positions, while civilians were ushered inside the temple for protection. Elena stood at the command post coordinating the response. Her formal attire had been replaced by battle armor, the transition from diplomat to warrior complete. She spotted Jack and Serath, gesturing for them to join her. "Unidentified craft approaching at high velocities," she reported as they reached her, "not matching any known Zephyrian or Draxan design." Jack scanned the northwestern sky, spotting a rapidly approaching object, leaving a trail of disturbed atmosphere. "Speed and trajectory." A Zephyrian tactical officer responded. Mach 3 maintaining direct course toward the temple. No response to communication attempts. Weapon systems, Jack asked, falling naturally into tactical assessment. Unknown, the officer replied. Our sensors detect unusual energy signatures, nothing we've encountered before. Jack studied the approaching craft, something about its configuration triggering recognition. Not from Nathan's memories, but from his own experiences on Earth. It's not Zephorian or Draxan, he said slowly. It's human. Elena turned to him sharply. Earth technology. Are you certain? The design, the propulsion signature, it's advanced, but the fundamentals match experimental aircraft I've seen during my military service. Jack's mind raced through implications. The quantum gateway must have remained partially active on Earth after I came through. The craft decelerated rapidly as it approached, displaying technological capabilities beyond public Earth aviation, but consistent with classified projects Jack had glimpsed during his SEAL career. It hovered above the temple perimeter, sleek and predatory, clearly military in design. Defense systems ready, the tactical officer reported. Hold fire, Jack and Elena commanded simultaneously. The craft descended slowly, landing gear extending as it settled onto a clear area near the temple entrance. For several tense moments, nothing happened. Then a hatch opened, and 3 figures emerged, humans in advanced tactical gear weapons, held at ready but not aimed. U.S. military, Jack murmured, recognizing the subtle insignias on their equipment. Special operations. The lead figure removed his helmet, revealing a man in his early 40s with the hard eyes and composed demeanor of a career operator. His gaze swept the assembled Zephorians before locking onto Jack with evident surprise. Colonel Reynolds, the man called, his voice carrying across the distance. Jack Reynolds. Jack stepped forward, positioning himself between the humans and Elena. Identify yourself, he called back. Major Thomas Vega, Joint Special Operations Command. Sir, we've been looking for you. The officer's professional composure barely contained his astonishment. The quantum gateway incident at Horizon facility registered as a possible hostage situation. We've spent 2 weeks trying to stabilize the dimensional tear to mount a rescue operation. 2 weeks. The time differential between dimensions explained much. What had been days for Jack on Zephoria had been weeks of crisis management on Earth. I wasn't taken, Major, Jack replied. I followed an intruder through the gateway accidentally. Major Vega nodded, processing this information. Sir, we're authorized to bring you home. The situation on Earth is complicated. The gateway event didn't go unnoticed. Multiple nations detected the energy signature. There's significant interest in what's on the other side. Jack understood the diplomatic speak. Earth governments had discovered the existence of Zephoria. The geopolitical implications were enormous. A habitable planet with advanced technology accessible through controllable gateways. The potential for exploitation was limitless. Elena stepped forward, her bearing regal despite the tension. I am Princess Elena of Zephoria. Your arrival is unexpected, but not unwelcome. Perhaps we should continue this discussion under less adversarial conditions. Vega hesitated, clearly unprepared for direct contact with alien royalty. His training reasserted itself quickly. That would be appreciated, Your Highness. We come with peaceful intent. As arrangements were made to escort the Earth visitors to a secure meeting area, Jack felt the weight of decision pressing upon him with renewed urgency. The arrival of Earth forces changed everything. No longer was his choice merely personal, it now carried implications for 2 worlds. Elena caught his eye as they walked toward the temple. This complicates matters, she said quietly. That's one way of putting it, Jack agreed. They'll want information technology resources. Earth governments think in terms of strategic advantage. As do ours, Elena acknowledged. The High Council will see opportunity as well as threat. Jack nodded grimly. And they'll want someone who understands both worlds to help navigate the relationship. The meeting chamber within the temple had been hastily converted for diplomatic purposes. The ancient crystalline architecture provided a stunning backdrop that clearly impressed the Earth visitors, though they maintained professional composure. Major Vega and his team sat across from Elena Sarath and several council members, with Jack positioned between the 2 delegations, physically embodying his unique position as bridge between worlds. Let me be direct, Vega said, after preliminary introductions. The U.S. government is aware that Colonel Reynolds encountered non-terrestrial intelligence at the Horizon facility. The quantum gateway remains partially active, though unstable. We've contained information about the incident, but that containment won't last indefinitely. Elena exchanged glances with her advisors before responding. Major Vega Zephoria has maintained peaceful relations with Earth for centuries through limited controlled contact. The gateway system was never intended for large-scale travel or resource exchange. With respect, Your Highness, the situation has evolved beyond intention. Vega's tone remained diplomatic but firm. The gateway technology exists. Multiple Earth nations are now aware of it and actively working to reproduce it. If managed properly, this could benefit both worlds. If not, he left the implication hanging, but everyone understood. Competition for access to Zephoria could trigger conflicts on Earth, while uncontrolled gateway proliferation could threaten Zephorian security. Jack studied the familiar patterns of military diplomacy unfolding before him. Cautious positioning, implied threats balanced with offered cooperation. The opening moves in a game of interplanetary chess where the stakes couldn't be higher. What exactly does Earth want from Zephoria? Jack asked, cutting through the diplomatic posturing. Vega turned to him, seeming relieved to address a fellow military man. Initially controlled cultural and scientific exchange, formal diplomatic relations, limited technological sharing focused on medical and environmental applications. His expression remained carefully neutral. Long-term objectives would develop based on the success of initial exchanges. And military applications, Sarath inquired, his experienced eyes missing nothing. Not our primary interest, Vega replied smoothly, though security cooperation against common threats would eventually be discussed. Jack recognized the careful evasion. Earth militaries would absolutely be interested in Zephorian crystal technology, energy, weapons, and stealth capabilities, just as Zephoria would be interested in Earth's nuclear capabilities, satellite systems, and biological sciences. The discussion continued for hours, establishing preliminary parameters for further talks. Jack contributed when needed, translating military concepts between the two groups and clarifying cultural misunderstandings. Throughout, he felt the weight of his unique position, neither fully Earth military nor Zephorian, yet intimately familiar with both. As the meeting concluded with agreements for continued communication, Vega approached Jack privately. Colonel, we're scheduled to return in 48 hours. There's a place for you on the craft. He hesitated, lowering his voice. Sir, I've been authorized to inform you that your status has been reconsidered. The Joint Chiefs are prepared to offer reinstatement at full rank with your choice of assignment. Your experience here is invaluable. Jack nodded, unsurprised. Earth's military establishment had discarded him when he seemed past his usefulness. Now that he represented access to alien technology and military knowledge, his age and experience were suddenly assets rather than liabilities. I'll consider it, Major. There's more, sir. Vega glanced toward the Zephorians. Intelligence suggests not all factions on this world welcome closer ties with Earth. Your position here could become complicated. We have concerns about your safety if you choose to remain. Jack met the younger officer's gaze directly. I appreciate the concern, Major, but I've spent my entire career in complicated positions. I'll make my decision based on where I can do the most good. After the Earth delegation departed to their craft with promises to return, Jack found himself once again on the ridge overlooking the temple. The day's events had crystallized the choice before him. Return to Earth, where his experience would be valued again, but primarily as a tool for military advantage. Or remain on Zephoria, helping navigate the inevitable complications of two worlds discovering each other while facing political opposition from those who feared change. He sensed Elena's approach before seeing her another inexplicable awareness that transcended normal perception. Your people made quite an entrance, he said as she joined him. As did yours, she replied. Impressive technology for a world we considered still developing. Jack smiled faintly. We humans advance quickly when motivated by competition or threat. He turned to face her. They offered me reinstatement, full-rank choice of assignment. Elena's expression remained carefully neutral. A significant opportunity. A significant manipulation, Jack corrected. They discarded me when I was inconvenient. Now I'm useful again. Yet you're considering it. Jack sighed, looking out across the Zephorian landscape that had begun to feel more like home than Earth ever had. I'm considering where I can do the most good. Earth will pursue gateway technology regardless of what I do. The question is whether I can help guide that pursuit toward cooperation rather than exploitation. And if you stayed, Elena asked, echoing their earlier conversation, I'd face opposition from conservatives who see me as a threat to Zephorian independence. My presence would complicate your political position. Jack turned to her. Unless we embrace the prophecy completely. Elena's eyes widened slightly at his directness. You mean a formal union, a symbolic reunification of bloodlines? I mean completing what Nathan and Alara began, Jack said carefully. Not just symbolically, but purposefully, creating a legitimate position from which to influence both worlds toward peaceful coexistence. The proposition hung between them laden with implications both political and personal. Jack was proposing not just to stay on Zephoria, but to fully embrace the legacy that had drawn him across dimensions to become what the prophecy had foretold, a bridge between worlds. That would be significant, Elena said finally. The council would see it as fulfillment of ancient prophecy. The conservative factions would struggle to oppose something so deeply rooted in our traditions. She studied his face carefully. But such a decision shouldn't be made for purely political reasons, Jack. Jack stepped closer, guided by instinct and memory that transcended lifetimes. Elena, I've spent my entire life serving causes larger than myself. I've sacrificed personal happiness for duty so many times I forgot what happiness felt like. He gestured toward the distant Earthcraft. I could return and serve again, trying to guide my world toward wisdom it may not want. He took her hand, a gesture both bold and natural. Or I could stay and build something new. Something that serves both worlds while allowing me, us, the connection that's been denied across centuries. Elena's composure softened, the diplomatic mask giving way to genuine emotion. I've ruled alone, made decisions alone, carried burdens alone, because that was what duty required. The prophecy always seemed like a distant legend until you arrived. Their fingers intertwined, human and Zephorian, yet perfectly matched. I won't pretend this isn't complicated, Jack said softly. We've known each other only days in this lifetime. What we feel is tangled with memories and destinies neither of us fully controls. And yet, Elena replied, when we fight together, when we work together, it feels like coming home. Like remembering something forgotten, Jack agreed. Not just Nathan and Alara's connection, but something uniquely ours. The twin suns began to set, bathing the landscape in golden crimson light. In the distance, the temple of eternity glowed with renewed purpose, its ancient systems awakening after centuries of dormancy. Below, Zephorian scientists and Earth visitors cautiously established the foundations of a relationship that would forever change both worlds. Jack Reynolds, former SEAL, reluctant security guard, dimensional traveler, stood at the confluence of past and future prophecy and choice. For the first time in decades, perhaps for the first time across multiple lifetimes, he felt the freedom of true decision, not duty imposed by others, but purpose embraced willingly. The High Council meets tomorrow to discuss the Earth delegation's proposals, Elena said. They'll want to know your decision. Jack nodded, understanding the timeline. And what will you tell them? Elena's violet eyes met his, a smile slowly illuminating her face. That depends entirely on what you decide, warrior of Earth. Not just a warrior anymore, Jack said thoughtfully. Not just a soldier following orders or a prophecy fulfilling itself. He looked toward the temple, then back to the extraordinary woman beside him, a leader bearing the weight of her world, who had nonetheless found space in her heart for connection. Maybe it's time for both of us to be something more than what duty alone would make us. The decision crystallized within him, not with the resignation of sacrifice, but with the clarity of rightness. Earth would always be his first home, the world that shaped him. But Zephoria offered something he'd never truly found there, purpose, aligned with personal fulfillment, duty that nourished rather than drained. I'm staying, he said simply, not just as advisor or ally, but as exactly what the prophecy foretold, a bridge between worlds starting with us. Elena's smile deepened, both regal and intimately personal. Then we have much to discuss with the council tomorrow. As darkness fell over Zephoria, Jack Reynolds stood beside Princess Elena, their silhouettes merging against the backdrop of ancient temple and alien sculpting. Behind them lay separate paths, before them a shared future neither could fully predict, but both chose to embrace. The warrior had returned not to repeat history, but to write its next chapter. This time not through sacrifice, but through choice.